All right, so this is another one of those Gen Z is incompetent videos. I got this in my recommended, or no, I think actually someone sent this to me on Discord, the incompetence epidemic. And looking at the thumbnail, it was like a bunch of examples of Gen Z not knowing how to do basic life stuff. And I get that this has become a big trend to talk about like failing testing scores, failing literacy rates for Gen Z, but it really has started to feel like a fear-mongering campaign at this point. Like, don't get me wrong, there are real issues in the American education system, real issues with parenting in this day and age, but it feels like we're trying to make something really complex into a simple, clickable trend for, like, YouTube videos. And looking into the data on all of this, it's less so that this problem is the result of a broken system that has only recently become broken, and more that it is the inevitable result of a broken system that has been broken for the vast majority of people, or not the vast majority, but a lot of people, and each successive generation we are watching as less and less and less people go through the education system with as ideal of a knowledge set as they should have. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too much into it. Maybe this video won't be as contentious as I think. Let's watch.
For the majority of the 20th century, developed countries documented a clear trend of increased human cognition from one generation to the next. As the decades came and went, literacy rates rose, educational attainment increased, and the average scores on intelligence tests consistently got higher and higher, all of which...
Okay, but like keep in mind, like prior to like 1900, God, like 90% of people, if I'm being generous, couldn't read. Like even as late as like the 1890s, it was a skill to know how to read.
Just to say that each generation was more educated, more capable, and generally regarded as smarter than the one before them. This trend of steadily increasing intelligence was named the Flynn effect, after the researcher James Flynn, who spent most of his career studying it. And obviously, it was an overwhelmingly good thing for the world. But more recently, things have begun to change. In the last decade or two, there's been a mounting pile of evidence to show that for the first time in over 100 years, both literacy and numeracy skills are on the decline among students in developed countries, including but not limited to the US, Canada, Australia, the UK, and most of Europe. Both grade school teachers and college and university professors have described a notable...
Do you want to know what I think is probably the result of a lot of this? Hopelessness. You know that meme where it's like that one friend who said they're not going to live to 20 or live to be 18 when they actually live to be 18? Do you have any idea how common that mindset has gotten? Like, with how much, you know, experts are pretty overt and open about the fact that, like, Gen Z and then Gen Alpha after us will have it the hardest of any generation in modern history. Like, the odds will be stacked against us and Gen Alpha more than ever. Like, it is, millennials had it hard, Gen X had it hard, we have it the hardest. And experts have been open about this fact since we were kids, that we are going to have it the hardest, that the system has been rigged against us, that we are going to fight the hardest uphill slope of any previous modern generation in America. And we've known that since we were in elementary school, because the experts were not shying away from it. So imagine, you're Gen Z, you're growing up your whole life, you know that college is getting more expensive, harder to attain, more difficult to get accepted to. Your college degree that you could get in the future is getting less valuable every year. Then you go to middle school, the problem continues. Then high school, the problem continues. Now it's finally time to go to college, and for the last 12 years, you have been hearing from experts across the board talking about how the system is rigged against you, that even with your college degree, you are going to have it the hardest that any college graduate has ever had in American history, because everything is already filled in. All the positions are taken. You know, like there's nepotism everywhere. You know, even when it comes to buying a house, all the houses are bought up and the prices through the roof, right? So if you're a Gen Zer and especially Gen Alpha, dude, what is the point of learning how to read, doing your math homework, caring about your grades? Why would they care? Like, there were long stints of time where I didn't give a fuck about my schooling because of the same kind of mindset. Like, oh, like, it's not even a secret that everything is rigged against us, and we have it the worst of any generation before. Like, why should I even try if you know that, like, everyone's just gonna say you've got it easy? Like, back in my day, we had to walk uphill both ways. Meanwhile, no. Back in your day, you had everything handed to you compared to us. So, yeah, it kind of makes sense why so many kids don't want to try anymore. Because they don't have there's no reason to try. Of course they're not trying. And they're smart enough, and they've got internet. Like, they know from a young age that, like, no matter how hard they try, there's never been a higher chance that they'll still fail at life anyway. So why even try? It's a toxic mindset, but why wouldn't they have that mindset?
Notable increase in students struggling with basic skills like reading, writing, math, and science. And employers increasingly report that new graduates often lack basic competencies in areas like written communication, critical thinking, and problem solving. And all this makes sense when you realize that several countries have reported a stagnation or even a decline in measured IQ scores, which all
This is what happens when you don't have a society that blatantly and proudly rewards these things. When somebody who has gotten a college degree struggles just as hard as a guy who didn't get his diploma and had to get his GED to find work, yeah, you're going to live in a society where a lot of people choose to get their GED instead of their college diploma. You know, like yeah, it's pretty obvious.
culminates in Gen Z being the first generation in modern history to
No.
score lower on standardized tests.
No, I'll turn off the video right now. Are you fucking serious with the Tide Pod thing? Has it actually been long enough that we're pretending that that was real? Okay.
Than their parents. Or as this Vice article succulently puts it, Gen Z is the first generation dumber than their parents. I think that's pretty funny, and if you've ever had the displeasure of working with a bunch of Gen Zs, which I have, then you know it's not a stretch to believe. But after you stop giggling, if you're like me, you probably...
By the way, guys, the Gen Z stare is probably the most common example of this, and what the Gen Z stare is when a Gen Z, like, service worker, it just stares at you because you don't know your end of the engagement. Like, you show up and you're like, at the front desk, and it's like, are you gonna order anything? Like, yeah, they're gonna stare at you and give you that Gen Z stare because you're supposed to know you're meant to order something. Like, they shouldn't have to say, okay, what will you have to order? And I love how boomers and Gen Xers complain about Gen Z being rude and whatnot, but it's like, dude, when I go into any kind of restaurant and there's a Gen Zer taking my order, I'm like, thank God, I can just say, hi, can I get blah, 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 please? And they're like, all right, I got you. And it's over. We're moving on. Like situation, we're good.
We want to know why this is happening. I mean, humans haven't just gone through some like major genetic defect or whatever over the last 20 years that has caused millions of people to be born with shit for brains. At least I don't think so. So what is the cause of this phenomenon and how can we stop it? First, I think it's important to highlight a couple statistics because while this issue is culminating most visibly with Gen Z and even more so with Gen Alpha, honestly, this problem isn't entirely isolated to them. In the US specifically, according to a 2023 study, 54% of adults, which in this case refers to people between the ages of 16 and 74, read below a 6th grade level. 28% scored at or below.
Okay, you know what? I recently did a video on this entire topic where we went into all the data on this. I respect that she's actually showing this, that it's not really that much of a new thing. It's a growing trend. Gen Z is just following a consistently ramping up trend of low literacy rates among Americans. Most Americans, their limit to reading is a 5th grade reading level. I believe the military has a very in-depth classification system to identify the reading difficulty of a block of text. So you've got really, I forget what exactly it's called. I think it originates from the West Point Academy, maybe? U.S. Military Reading Comprehension. Let's see. Yes, the ASVAB, I think, is what this is in reference to. In the U.S. military context, reading comprehension usually refers to the paragraph comprehension, PC, portion of the ASVAB, Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery. This test measures your ability to identify key points, analyze written information, and understand direct facts or logical inferences. Yeah, I don't think this is actually... What? No, this isn't what I'm thinking of. This is like a specific test for joining the military, but like within like the armed forces, they do tests to figure out like how intelligent someone is, and they usually do it with reading tests, and they've got different like tiers of intelligence they rank military servicemen under based on how easily they can read aloud a sentence. Maybe it is the ASVAB that I'm thinking of. Yeah, might be.
Level 1 literacy, which indicates significant difficulty with everyday reading tasks. And 21% are considered functionally illiterate and unable to complete basic reading tasks at all, which is wild. And I say all of this to highlight the fact that, at least in America, things have been looking bleak for a while now, which is exactly why this is so concerning. Like, with the bar set so low to begin with, how is it possible that younger generations are limboing right under it? The short and simple explanation here is that our modern society, by way of function, has increasingly begun to discourage the development of many cognitive skills, particularly...
Okay, all right, hold on. All right, I think she might actually hit on the right reasons. All right, maybe I spoke too soon earlier. It seems like she might be hitting on the right reasons.
The ones that lend themselves to things like literacy, communication, independent thought. Really, this failure is the result of multiple factors that have come together all at the same time, of new technologies, of changing social habits, and of flawed educational philosophies which have collectively created this tsunami of stupidity that's going to take decades to recover from.
I've got a hangover. Who knows what that means?
Doesn't that mean you're drunk?
No, it means I was drunk yesterday.
But let's start at the beginning. The year was 2002. I was 10 years old. Simple Plan had just dropped their debut record, No Pads, No Helmets, Just Balls, which would go on to form my entire personality for the next 20 years. And gold medal shoe dodger and soon-to-be war criminal George W. Bush was in the White House scheming for ways to combat the stereotype of Americans being dumb. I'm joking, but I'm also kind of not. He signed the No Child Left Behind Act into law, which was intended to hold individual schools accountable for their students' grades by introducing standardized testing as a way to objectively measure whether or not teachers were doing their jobs well and whether or not students were grasping the materials that were being taught.
I remember
Schools
this.
whose students consistently scored poorly on these tests would face consequences like restructuring and state intervention. And on the surface, this sounds good. I mean, a school's entire job is to educate their students, so it would make sense that the government would want a way to track whether or not they're doing so successfully until they could step in if they weren't. But
she's not wrong here. There's a but.
what actually happened is an entirely different story. Rather than schools doing their best to help students by encouraging deep learning and critical thinking, they started just teaching to the test. Whether or not a student truly understood the material was far less important than just being able to memorize a phrase or a sequence so they could pick the right answer on the tests. It's become kind of a meme, but that's why we all know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but most of us don't actually know what that means. It's also why we were taught to memorize our multiplication tables at record speed instead of being taught how to actually do the math in our heads. And just like how money becomes less valuable when the government prints more of it into circulation, high test scores mean nothing when everyone is scoring equally high regardless of their true level of comprehension. It means kids who are inadequately prepared to graduate graduated anyways. No Child Left Behind sounds nice and flowery, but honestly, some children need to be left behind, or at least held back. You're not doing them or really anyone else any favors by manipulating the statistics to conceal their failures. So that was definitely strike one, and it was a big one, but it was just the beginning. Next, let's talk about technology. As we get deeper into this, we're going to talk...
Yeah, the reality is that conservatives do not want to admit that there is a large proportion of, or not a large, but a decent proportion of our population who deal with disabilities severe enough that they will never be able to keep up in academics and maybe won't ever be able to keep up with a job. And just because they were born that way does not mean it's their fault. And frankly, in the world's richest and most successful country, that person should never have to worry about anything ever. The government should take care of them for life. But we have Republicans who never want to have that conversation come up, God forbid. So the idea of basically forcing people who range from like overtly like dealing with severe disability or are just really not bright, pushing them through the school system to artificially inflate like graduation numbers and deflate the number of people who probably aren't capable of reaching the very high bar that society sets to succeed in the workforce and in academics and stuff. Instead of the government taking care of them as it should, we have to pretend as though it's just a problem with the schooling. You know, it's a schooling problem.
Talk about how all these factors culminate in a lack of direction, in many ways, not the least of which is with work and careers. Honestly, at any age and at any stage of life, it's very possible that you're feeling stagnant in your career or like you want to make a change. Like you could be achieving more, but you just don't know where to begin. The fact is that the people who have the clearest visions of where they're going and who are the most successful at what they do, they don't stumble into it by accident. They have mentors and coaches and people guiding them along the way.
Oh, so the ASVAB score is what I was thinking of. That score determines whether you're able to be a CBRN technician or are stuck as a cook. Okay, yep. Kirkney knows. I was right. Sick.
And you can have that too with today's sponsor, Strawberry.me. Career coaching with Strawberry.me gives you the clarity,
God
and
damn.
strategy, and accountability needed to turn your goals into
That
this video
sponsor
and let's
jump
get back to
scare.
it. So there isn't really a question as to whether or not technology has made our lives better. It absolutely has. But a more fair question to ask is if the same tools that have made life easier have also made intellectual effort optional. And in a lot of cases, I think it has. And to be clear, reduced effort isn't always a bad thing. Like, humans have always strived to increase our efficiency by reducing the effort we put into things, and technology has enabled us to do that. Cars made it easier to get around, washing machines saved us countless hours from scrubbing our clothes by hand. There's countless examples like this. What I'm trying to say is that convenience isn't a bad thing at all. The difference, though, is that inventions like cars and home appliances, they reduce physical labor, but our more modern technology is reducing cognitive labor, and that's very different. Take our phones, for example. Yeah, you can okay boomer me if you want, I guess. But the fact is that we have offloaded a lot of our mental tasks to our phones. We no longer...
I disagree with this. I don't agree with the tech excuse anymore. I don't, because like the fact is it's never been easier to research. Oh my god. It has never been easier to research. Like, Every bit of the world's info is at your fingertips. For a minute there, Google was borderline unusable and it was frustrating. And as much as I hate it, Gemini AI has actually made it a lot better. Like if you're curious about a subject, you can just ask Gemini AI to link you every relevant link on that subject from a reputable source. And then you go and read all those sources. You don't even listen to what Gemini says. You just have it gather all the links for you and just drop it in a chat feed. And boom, you can do all of your research directly from original sources, or you can have it summarize it all for you. Write a couple sentences and you're good. Wait, Gemini did something not garbage? What? It's shockingly good these days. I'm not gonna lie. I hate any kind of generative like stealing art and then recreating its own sort of fake original art kind of AI. Like that shit's garbage. But text-based information aggregation AIs, probably the least problematic kind that exists. And it's made researching and learning easier than ever. Like, let's say you want to learn how quantum physics works. You could legitimately, like, just go on, like, Gemini, which is built into, like, if you just Google how does quantum mechanics work, you can have a back and forth convo with Gemini, and it'll explain it like you're a 3-year-old if that's what it takes for you to understand it. If there's some small detail you're not quite getting, you can have it rephrase its explanation 500 times till you get it. Simplify it so a first grader can understand it. It'll do that. You know, it's never been easier to use modern technology to learn. The lack of desire to learn is the problem. That's the problem.
We need to learn to get around because we all have GPS navigation in our pockets. We don't have to remember anyone's phone number because it's saved in our contacts. We don't even have to decide for ourselves what we want to read or watch or listen to because it's all selected for us by an algorithm. And straight up, I'm guilty of all of this myself, so I'm not necessarily throwing shade, but we can't ignore this. We have apps to do everything for us, from scheduling to budgeting to ordering a pizza. And while all these things may be trivial on their own, collectively, they have snuffed out important life skills like memorization and planning and reasoning and communication and problem solving, all of those things. So it's not necessarily a matter of a particular demographic having lower intellectual potential so much as it's just them being less accustomed to practicing certain skills in everyday life. And as my grandmother always liked to say, if you don't use it, you lose it. But it even goes so much further than that, because if literacy and reasoning are the bricks and mortar of intelligence, attention is the foundation that house sits on. The ability to concentrate and the determination to complete a task, be it to read a complex text, solve a math problem, do research, think creatively, or even just express yourself articulately, all these things require you to have a reasonable attention span, but our phones and social media...
No. I mean, you do need a good attention span, but it's a skill. It's a skill. Let's not kid ourselves. It's a skill. If you are not taught how to manage your desire to engage with something stimulating when you're doing something unstimulating but important, you have not developed the skill of discipline yet. You know that one Jocko Willink phrase, discipline is freedom? I used to cringe so hard at that phrase, but as I get older, I kind of get it a little more with every year I get older. You know? It's like, fuck, he's kind of right, because like when you lack discipline, you have no path to achieving freedom in your life, really. But when you have discipline and you can set yourself to do anything, no matter how far-fetched it seems, you genuinely do have the freedom to do anything, right? Like if you have discipline, you could climb Mount Everest if that's an idea you thought would be cool, but you're like, but I could never do it. But if you have discipline, actually, you do have the freedom to climb Mount Everest. You could do it if you push yourself and you wake up every morning and you do the jogs and you train and stuff like that. I kind of get it. People need to be taught discipline, and it's self-discipline, truly. It's like being able to withhold yourself from what you want to do what you need to do. The problem is we have never lived in a society that rewards that less. We used to live in a society where not going to a party with your friends and instead pulling an all-nighter to study on your exam to get the highest grade in class, that used to pay off when you were younger. Like that was a guaranteed path to being a millionaire, basically, back in like the 70s, 80s, etc. Nowadays, what's the point? You know, that's the mindset a lot of people have. That's genuinely what I think.
are destroying that too. On a day-to-day basis, the majority of us are inundated with a never-ending barrage of notifications, reels, messages, and advertisements which fill every idle moment, whether we're lying in bed, waiting in line at the grocery store, or even just sitting on the toilet. Social media platforms invest billions of dollars into engineering their algorithms in a way that keeps you engaged and addicted, with things like short-form content, the infinite scroll, and manufactured FOMO to ensure that you never have a quiet...
Yeah, I do hate short-form content, but to be honest, most of my hatred for short-form content comes from the fact that I make long-form content, and since short-form started to be a thing, I've watched as in my analytics as people's attention spans have decreased, and now it's harder than ever to hit that 50% viewer retention number that lets your videos grow, because now everybody is so primed to click off in the first few minutes. Like, it's never been worse when it comes to the attention spans. I won't lie there. I can see it in my data. Since Shorts got added to YouTube, it's gotten bad.
Moment of introspection in your brain. Your memory works like a muscle, and when you're constantly distracted and overstimulated, focusing on or remembering anything becomes next to impossible. In fact, I bet that you don't even remember what the last video was that you watched right before this one. Prove me wrong. Without looking at your watch history, post the title or even just the topic of the last thing you watched before this in the comment section down.
I mean, the last one that we watched was the gay and trans, like, cycle of hate and stuff, but that's just because, you know, I'm covering topics. But that's a good point. Most people probably don't remember the last video they watched.
Below. Can you do it? Hey, by the way, if you're enjoying this video, do me a quick favor if you haven't yet, and maybe subscribe. Just saying. The instant
You know, maybe if you like my content too, you could drop a like and a comment and a sub on this video / stream. It does help a ton.
gratification we get from our phones delivering us non-stop entertainment 24 hours a day trains our brains to be unable to handle prolonged focus and boredom and frustration. If you don't like what you're watching, you can just flick your finger to see something new. Right now, on the side of your screen right here, there are dozens of other videos biting for your attention if this one isn't doing it for you. So there's no need to endure a single second of dissatisfaction or discomfort. And the obvious result of this is that the moment someone tries to read something they don't understand, or tries to solve a problem that requires a bit of pondering, or encounters even the slightest bit of friction in anything they're trying to do, they just give up, and they don't figure it out. It's called learned helplessness. It's when you become convinced that you can't do something before you even really try, so you just shut down. And one of the biggest contributors to learned helplessness is seeking shortcuts. When you ask someone to do something for you before you've even tried to do it yourself, you believe that you need them to do it for you. When you cheat on a test, you believe that you can't succeed without cheating. You completely demotivate yourself from making an effort because you've subconsciously convinced yourself that you're incapable, and then that becomes your reality. And the convenience...
We are shirking some of the obvious blame that is on the fact that, like, the system of our society, like, going from being an 18-year-old with, like, you know, fresh level 1 adult, basically, to being, like, a 30-year-old level 30 sort of maximum level adult who's, like, or not max level, but, like, mid-level adult who's got, like, their shit together. Maybe they're looking at buying their first house. To being a 60-year-old who's, like, got their, you know, they've had a home for 10, 15, 20 years. They have grandkids, or at least their kids are looking at getting kids soon. Like, that path was so much more, like, that you could see it. It was lit up ahead of you in previous generations. And that path has gotten dimmer with each successive one. Now the path ahead just looks like pitch black. There's no lights lighting up the sidewalk anymore. Like, we don't know if there's just an open manhole, you know, so, like 5 feet in front of us we're going to fall into. Like, that's been the Gen Z experience, and God knows how bad Gen Alpha's going to have it. Like, if Gen Z had it this bad, Gen Alpha is going to have it rough.
Economy only perpetrates this. In the 80s and 90s, roughly 50% of 16-year-olds in America had a driver's license. Getting your license was not only a rite of passage, but it was the key to freedom, to being able to go out with your friends, to get a job, to date. But today, we're seeing a record low number of young people getting their licenses. In fact, it's dropped by half, down to about 25%. Much of Gen Z and Gen Alpha...
Well, do you want to acknowledge why that's probably the case? Because, like, insurance and car payments have never been more expensive, and people have never been missing those payments more than they are right now. In fact, missing car payments is one of the #1 recession indicators. It's one of the first things people fail to pay when they don't have enough money to make bills, is the car payments. Car payments have never been higher. Car insurance has never been more expensive. So it kind of makes sense that it's never... we've never had less young people driving, or even bothering to get their license.
Have either significantly delayed learning to drive or have just decided not to bother at all. And think about it. It's very easy to do most things today without driving because you never even really have to leave your house if you don't want to. Why go out for food when you can use DoorDash? Why hang out at the mall when you can just buy whatever you want with Amazon Prime? Why go hang out with your friends when you can just FaceTime them or play video games with them remotely? Why go out and try to meet someone when you can just swipe right for a booty call? And on the odd occasion that you do need to go out, you can just get an Uber. But the result of all this convenience has been not only a concerning degradation of social skills and networking opportunities, not to mention physical exercise and fresh air and all those other things, but many...
Yeah, and then of course, the last 2 years, gas has been through the fucking roof. But, you know, accounting for... We've seen a pretty ongoing rise in the cost of car insurance and car payments. Like, it's... Like, you can get a used car, but even then, like, you're just incurring so much extra... Like, you've made a hole in your wallet when you get a car. And I think Gen Z is the first generation to be like, you know what? No, I'm gonna pocket all the money from my first job instead of spending it on a car and car insurance and gas, and I'm gonna spend it on something else.
Teens and 20-somethings now have an actual phobia of driving. They're scared to. A survey of 2,000 Gen Zs revealed that they have anxiety about everything, from changing a tire to jump starting a car to parallel parking to even
This is real. Yeah, the learned helplessness, like anxiety about like basic tasks and stuff is very real. And a lot of it is I don't know, like Gen X must have just been the most incompetent generation of parents ever. I don't know how. I don't know what it is. Like clearly it's not Gen Z's fault. Like a whole generation of kids didn't just decide not to grow up just together spontaneously for no reason. You know, like clearly the parents are at fault. They created them, they raised them.
Going to a car wash, which I really don't understand. More than 10% even said that they'd missed a dream job because they were too scared to drive. That's insane, and this is a prime example of learned helplessness.
Oh, that's
Without
sad.
apps for everything and food delivery and remote work, most people would have no choice but to learn to drive, and I don't think that anxiety would even play a role. You want to live a functional adult life, so you learn to drive and you get out there in the world. But without a need to, they've decided that they can't, and they won't even try. And this isn't even really about driving. This isn't about whether or not you can live a full life without a car. Depending on where you live, maybe you can, but what it is about is the lack of motivation and how that cripples your confidence and makes you incompetent. And of course, there's probably no bigger cause of learned helplessness today than AI. As I've come to learn more recently, the majority of AI usage is not actually happening with the general population, or at least not the most powerful forms of it. Things like ChatGPT and Gemini or whatever, they're not the main purpose of AI, and they're not the most important cases for it. The majority of AI usage is actually happening behind the scenes in advanced machinery and programs for companies and industries that you and I will never directly interact with. And in these situations, it can be extremely powerful. But the consumer-facing parts of AI, the LLMs, the AI tools being integrated into every app and website we use, the generative side of AI, it's a huge problem because people are outsourcing their thinking to it. Like, why write an essay when ChatGPT can do it for you in seconds? Why read a book when Gemini can give you...
I think the AI is really helpful for research because it can aggregate so much information. You can literally just ask it, gather all the links related to insert issue and only gather the reputable ones. And it does that for you. But if you just ask it, like, I don't know, write me my college essay, well, you've completely thrown away the benefit that AI offers at this point. You can't better yourself just by having it do the work for you, but God, can it make it easier to learn. Like, if your goal is to legitimately learn, it can make it easier.
A quick summary instead. People now rely on AI to do everything from writing a quick email to giving them health advice, which is concerning to say the least. Not just because AI has been known to frequently provide factually incorrect information or because it's programmed to affirm your delusions, but because once again, it's become a way...
It's called hallucinations, by the way. AI hallucinates. It's why you can't trust you can't, like, let's say I'm making my my prepared video essay videos. I couldn't just trust whatever the AI Gemini results tell me, like at the top of the Google search, because that might hallucinate a summary. But what it links to will be like valid sources related to it, and you can go read the source. And there are cases where what the AI says and what the source it links to say are opposite things. You can't just trust the AI to summarize those sources for you. Not if you're, like, really trying to be authoritative on an issue.
For people to avoid using their goddamn brains and to avoid developing and practicing the skills that make you a functional, competent person. Imagine having a job where your coworkers can't even jot down notes or respond to an email. Oh wait, you don't have to imagine because it's already happening. Having a tool at your disposal is one thing, but being crippled by your reliance on it is something else entirely. And I think it's particularly troubling when you realize how young most kids are today when an iPad or a phone is put in front of them. Like, my generation was the last one to experience at least part of our childhood without the internet. In my case specifically, I was like the last...
Blaskowitz, you should probably know, the Kino Casino people did expose the quartering, but they're also very far right. Don't assume it's like a lefty channel or something. It's like right-wing infighting, that whole drama.
Last kid in my class to get a computer at home because we were poor as shit. But that means that for the first 10 or 11 years of my life, there were really no screens. There was no Google. For a while, I didn't even have cable, but there were storybooks and coloring books and crosswords and board games and bikes and skateboards and scooters and every outside toy you can think of. And that's not to say that I'm not addicted to my phone now as an adult, because unfortunately I am working on it, but at least by the time...
Oh, Kino the band. Okay, I thought, because we brought it up earlier, the Kino Casino people. I thought you were referring to them. I was just letting you know, like, not a lefty channel.
When these things became prominent, my brain was mostly developed. I already knew how to read and write and do math. I knew how to look something up and fact check what I was reading. I knew how to write a resume and interview for a job. But now babies are having their attention spans fried before they've even been weaned onto solid food. Like, there are kids out there who are still shitting their pants because they don't know how to ask to go to the bathroom, but they know how to find their favorite show on YouTube. And speaking of bad parenting, let's talk about bad parenting. I think it's fair to say that most of us can think back to our childhood and think of certain moments or situations that we experienced that could have been handled better. Maybe you were made to deal with something before you were ready to, or maybe your parents or your teachers or someone didn't treat you the way they should have. Maybe your needs went unmet in some way, or you experienced anxiety in situations when you shouldn't have had to. To a massively varying extent, we probably all have that in common. And I think it's human nature for parents to want to do better by their kids than their parents did by them. And I think that's generally a good thing. It's certainly well intended. You think about the times you struggled when you were young, and you want to make your kids' lives better than yours was, which is awesome. But I think what we're seeing now is an overcorrection that is manifesting as a rise in helicopter parenting. Helicopter parents are generally anxious themselves, and they're over-involved in their kids' lives in a way that doesn't foster healthy age-appropriate boundaries, nor encourage personal growth and independence. This can look like the parents of an adult child doing everything for them, from booking their appointments and driving them around, to trying to find them a job, to doing their laundry and cooking all their meals, and interfering in situations where they should be advocating for themselves, which once
This is super common in Gen Z.
again robs them of the opportunities to develop these skills on their own and fills them with anxiety and low self-esteem. I realize that this is anecdotal, and I'm sure that there's a discussion to be had about demographics and whatnot, but for over 10 years,
I will say, the one exception to this is doctor's appointments. Always go with another person to your doctor's appointments if you can. Because oftentimes when if you're complaining about a problem, not if you're just getting a checkup or if you've got like a thing you're getting checked in on that's like an ongoing problem that the doctor knows about and is specifically there to check on the progress of. But if you're there to complain about problems that you're dealing with, dude, doctors love to write you off unless there's a second person there. When the doctor is outnumbered for some reason, that's when they take the complaints of the patient seriously. Like, yeah, my knee has been killing me. If you're just there alone and you say that, they're just gonna be like, yeah, I just need to stretch more. But if like your girlfriend is there with you or your dad's there with you and they're like, no, seriously, his knee has been like bothering him, the doctor will be like, you know what? Okay, yeah, let's look into this. Let's see how your reflexes are doing. Like they'll actually look into it, you know. So that's the one example where it's like, I think it's fine if Gen Z as their parents go with them to the doctor, because man, doctors just love to not take your issues seriously unless you've got someone with you. Really? So no one person visiting the doctor is a one no-go? Well, like, okay, like I said, if you are there to have something you suspect is a problem checked out, that's when you don't want to go alone, because doctors love to write you off as complaining. But if you have a second person backing up your complaints, it makes it way more likely that the doctor will take you seriously. Trust me on this, okay? Trust me.
I worked a public-facing job that brought me into the homes and the lives of hundreds of families every year. And it was really jarring for me to see the family dynamics on full display, especially how they evolved over time. Like, I'd be in my late 20s or my early 30s, and whenever I was working with a family who had kids that were maybe 8 to 10 years younger than me, it became immediately obvious how incredibly emotionally fragile these kids were. And I'm not even saying that as a dig, but they were riddled with anxiety.
Oh, let me just tell you an example. I went to the dermatologist on my own recently to have, like, all my bodily moles checked on and whatnot. I was a lifeguard when I was younger, so I wanted to make sure none of them are cancer. And dude, my dermatologist looked at them for like a half second. It was the most like, really? Are you sure you don't want to once over again? Like, I was like really trying to imply he should look a little harder, because like he did not look thoroughly. Oh my god. Like he like, yeah, you look good. Like, why the fuck am I here? This appointment is an hour away from where I live. That's it? God, yeah, don't go to get things checked in on alone.
Anxiety. They were unable to make eye contact or speak normally, and at even the slightest inconvenience or frustration, they would just come completely unglued and start crying or throwing a tantrum. Both the guys and girls equally, by the way. I mean, I'm calling them kids, but they were not kids, they were adults. And it was bizarre because they weren't that far away from me in age, but they seemed like little kids. And more often than not, their parents talked to them and treated them like they were. Like, I can't even tell you how awkward it was for me to stand there and watch a parent physically pat their 25-year-old son on the back and talk about what a good boy he is and how proud they are of him. Like, talk about getting the ick. Ugh. I guess the point is that despite the snarky title I'm probably going to end up giving this video, it's not really that young people today are objectively dumber or less capable than previous generations, so much as it's that the world that we're living in has set them up to fail in every way imaginable. Like, if I'm being generous, and I'm going to be honest,
I'm going to be completely honest, I feel like the fact that Gen Z has it the most fucked of any generation ever, but one of the main things we're willing to put the blame on is, like, I would say the ability to still be supportive even when your kid is an adult is one of the more, like, admirable things that has gotten to be more popular over time. Believe it or not, it is pretty rare in the world for kids to be expected, I say kids, for adults to be expected to move away from their parents in general. Like, the idea of moving away at 18 and, like, not talking to your parents, not living with your parents, that's a very American thing. Like, once again, because America is a very wealthy country as well, which is the reason why we have the nickname Europores for the Europeans. Like, in Europe and through most of the world, like, the idea of being 30 and still living with your parents is extremely common and extremely normal. But in America, the idea of, like, living with your parents at 20 is seen as embarrassing. Less so now, though. With Gen Z, it's gotten to be much less the case because it's never been more impossible to not be in that situation. But like, yeah, it is interesting how that's like the thing that we're focusing on. Hey Xanderholics, hey FVGBE, your name, my friend. You gotta, not no hate, but that name is a rough one to read. Yeah, where I'm from, kids are expected to leave the house after they get married. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I always hear what the standard is for that in other countries, and I'm like, wow, that's so different to America. Like in America, God, like the normal familial setup in Europe is so weird to an American.
Don't like to be, you can maybe almost say that they're a victim of their circumstances, though that really does feel like an avoidance of accountability for a group of people who, despite how they may be living, are in fact grown adults. The problem is that it's really hard to be self-aware and take accountability when you're living in a massive confirmation bias all the time. Like if you and all your friends went out every single weekend and got blackout drunk, it would be really hard for you to see that you may have a drinking problem because you're not doing anything different or worse than anyone else. If you're drowning in debt, but so is everyone else you know, it doesn't really seem like an issue. It seems normal. And that exact same thing can be said about this lost generation. Like, if you're 25 years old and you're unemployed and living with your parents and unable to drive and racking up credit cards and socially anxious and addicted to your phone and barely able to read, but everyone else around you is more or less in the same situation, it can be difficult to see that you have work to do. And it can be difficult to accept that a lot of this is within your control. And that's exactly why it's so important to step outside of your bubble and see what the world has to offer outside of your front door. Make an effort to surround yourself with people who are where you want to be instead of where you are right now. If you truly believe that you are the smartest person in your friend group, you are probably hanging out with
That's real. That's definitely real. That piece of advice right there. Surround yourself with people that are where you want to be is a huge one. That is a huge one. It's a sad truth, but as you get older, you start to realize which friends are like low-key holding you back in life and which ones are pulling you forward. But then you got to worry about like the friends that are pulling you forward. Do they start to see you as someone who's holding you back? And it's like, the
wrong friend group because there's no room for growth there. Instead of aiming downwards towards mediocrity, study the people who seem to be the exceptions to the rule and figure out what they're doing differently than you. Also, I know this is hard, but try to lay off your phone. The most effective way that I myself have found to do this is just to replace it with other things that I enjoy equally or more, like reading books or going for walks, or imagine this, leaving the house and spending time with people face to face. As I've said, your brain is a muscle every bit as much as your biceps and your abs are. And it needs to be worked out too, which means...
All right, I'm gonna hit her though with the Giga Truth nuke, okay? Because there's one little detail that she might be forgetting in this story. This is a YouTuber with like 217,000 subscribers who I would guess pulls like 1 million plus views on her channel per month at least, probably closer to 5 million. So like she's established financially. I imagine that even if she is Gen Z, I don't know if she is, she looks like she might be a millennial. Even if she's Gen Z, she's an influencer, like a successful influencer. So I don't know if she fully understands what it's like for most Gen Zers, because like most Gen Zers are not influencers, they're not YouTubers, they're not like, their job isn't a work from home job. They have like a very, very time consuming career, right? Like where they have to actually go to work and show up at a place and then clock in and then go home, and they've got commute times to account for at their 9 to 5. Like that, when you have a 9 to 5, what you really have is like, it's more like an 8 to 6, because most people have at least an hour of commute, you know? It's America, right? And then there's traffic because we have rush hour. Like, most people don't have that much time to read a book. Let's be real. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to make excuses for people. You can make time to read a book, but I don't know. I think that you kind of need some class consciousness. I think you low-key need to understand that a big part of why Gen Z has given up and why Gen Alpha is going to give up way harder than Gen Z is because our system, late-stage capitalism is what we're living through, is demotivating to people. Like, Gen Z doesn't want to try because trying doesn't get rewarded anymore. And that's the problem with capitalism in this day and age. Like, like early on, you know, it seemed like it's super duper fair, but these days, it's never felt more broken. Look at Elon, world's first trillionaire. Does anyone really think Elon Musk deserves to be the world's richest person? Does anyone think Elon Musk worked hard to become the world's richest person? It's demotivating. It is. I don't know. I that's what I blame.